Hey everybody, welcome back to the NerdNest podcast. I am Bill, and today we are joined by, or I am joined by, Kyle and Russ. What's going on, guys? Kyle, what's shaking?
Hey, not much. Just having fun hanging out with you guys.
Awesome. Russ, what's going on, man? You just got back from your whirlwind trip.
Yeah, I'm jet lagged. So it's funny. It wasn't a long time zone difference, but it's just enough to screw up our sleep schedules. So
Yeah, I think just getting on a plane just automatically screws things up. And did you had to get on like lots of planes, right? Because you went to different places.
many planes. Yeah. So like, for example, from Hawaii to Bali, which is the first place we went, it was 3 different flights, and there was like 4 to 5 hour layovers in between each of them too. And so, oh my gosh, yeah, we were on the road for a long time just getting there.
That's awesome. And you brought like devices with you to keep you entertained.
Yeah, my Steam Deck it's funny because I packed everything. I thought about this for weeks ahead of time. I was like, I'm going to bring my WinMax 2. It's like a laptop plus a handheld, can get everything done in one. And I packed it up, and I just knew in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm not going to play this thing. And so I put the Steam Deck in there. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to cram the Steam Deck inside. And I'm so glad I did, because it was the perfect device to bring. So
That's awesome. And you put out a video about that, right, when you got back?
yeah, I did. And yeah, I just went this morning as a recording here today. And yeah, it's doing pretty well. It's funny. It's one of those things I don't want to talk about travel a lot, but a lot of people ask about it. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the whole shebang. And so I even filmed a little bit on my phone while I was on travel. And so I put all of those clips in there too. And so it's a pretty fun video.
Awesome. All right. So before we get to the news, I just want to let everybody know that you can submit topics in the comment section on the YouTube channel if you want, just like Rue 3005 and Fender 178 did. If your topics get picked for the show, I'll send you a code for a game on Steam. I'll reply to you. It won't be on Telegram or any of that nonsense. I'll give you the code right in the comment section. So make sure that you look out for that if you do leave comments. We've got 2 topics that were sent in this week that we're going to talk about at the end of the show, but I figured I'd give everybody a quick preview about what we're going to be talking about. Rue 3005 gave us this really cool topic that got all of us thinking about games from different decades, like our favorite games that we're going to want to have from different decades. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show. And then Fender, they asked us something about a possibility of a certain MMO coming to the Xbox, and we will talk about that at the end of the show as well. But first, let's talk about the games that we've been playing. Russ, what have you been playing? Well, what did you play while you were out and about?
Yeah, so I only ended up playing 2 games. Number one, I had just a main goal of beating Tears of the Kingdom while I was gone, because I wanted to do the spoiler cast with you guys. And so I put it on my Steam Deck, and I've been playing it mostly on that anyway. And we've talked about it before, but I needed my cheats. And so I did all that, and yeah, I played through it. So I finished it. I was about 2/3 of the way done already, but it's still like that end game part took me forever. We'll talk about that during the spoiler cast. But yeah, so I finished Tears of the Kingdom, and so I probably sunk 10, 12 hours into that just from all those flights. And then Hades was the other game that I would just kind of, at night when we got back from the hotel and we're just trying to cool off in the AC, I would kind of, bring up the Steam Deck and play that. And so I ended up beating that game another 7 times. And so it's one of those games you got to get in the loop, and so I beat it 1 time already, but you're supposed to beat it like 10 times to get the full story. And so I'm still kind of going through that, but really enjoyed that experience too.
I love that game. I haven't even beat it once, just because my attention span is terrible. And every time I feel like I've got a good build this time, and then I get killed, I'm like, I'm never going to get that good of a build again. And so then I just never get back to it. Kyle, what'd you play this week, man?
Well, we didn't have the podcast last week, so I'll mention that too. I completed God of War Ragnarok last Wednesday, I think. And I started Persona 5 since.
What'd you think of, I didn't play God of War Ragnarok. I played the first one. I liked it. I didn't love it as much as everybody else. What did you think of God of War Ragnarok? Did you feel like it was a step up or a step down from God of War, whatever the last one? Was it just called God of War?
It was just God of War, yeah.
Yeah, just God of War.
It was definitely a step up. I beat God of War last year. And then, yeah, Ragnarok was a step up. It was kind of like a Breath of the Wild, the Tears of the Kingdom thing. Everything that was there just got improved upon. So it was a much better experience overall, I think.
And then Persona 5, how many hours do you think you're into it so far?
I think when I saved last night, I think I was at 14.
Nice. Are you enjoying that game, or
Oh yeah.
how you feeling about it?
Yeah, it's a great time. I've been splitting my time between PC and Steam Deck, and it plays great on deck. But I mean, it's just been very relaxing, kind of like old era Final Fantasy turn-based, but with extra strategy. So it's been amazing.
I do love the menus in that game. Just the way it looks. It looks so alive, and it I don't know how to describe it. It just looks friggin' awesome. I love the menus in that game, which is a stupid thing to say, but I think that they did a great job with that.
The art direction and music in that game are like phenomenal.
Yeah, my son always talks about how much he likes the music from Persona 5, and I haven't put enough time into it to appreciate that, but it's definitely a game that I've been interested in. I always kind of just shoved it away because I know it's like, from what I understand about the game, it like takes place in high school, and
Yeah.
I teach high school, so I spent enough time high school, so I was like, I don't think so. That's not for me, but everybody keeps saying how good the game is, so maybe I need to finally give it another shot. For me, this week I went retro, and I've got my computer set up with EmuDeck for Windows, and I've been using this video game controller, which is the Mega Drive style 6-button layout from 8BitDo or 8BitDo, however it is that you want to say it. And I've been playing Sega Genesis games like crazy, but the one that I've been putting the most time into has to be Streets of Rage 2, which I don't know that I ever played that back in the day. I know I played the original Streets of Rage, but Streets of Rage 2, I don't think that I played that on the Genesis. I don't think any of my friends owned it. I am really loving that game. It's so much fun. I think I'm up to like level 8. I'm at the beach is how far that I've gotten, but I keep getting the game over and back to the beginning and have to start over. But it's really, really fun, and I love that. Like, I'll be playing or something, and my wife will be like, hey, can you come help me in the garden or something? And I just hit start and select, and the whole thing just shuts down, and I walked out and, help her with whatever. And when I come back and I start the game up, it jumps right back into exactly where I was when I left off, because I used one of Russ's guides to figure out, like, how is it that I get it to do that. And it's just awesome. The drop in and drop out that you get with Emulation Station and RetroArch and all that stuff is really cool. My one gripe with this controller is every time that I start it up, I have to reconfigure this controller because it's got like a C button and a Z button, and those are weird. So I've got some more tweaking to do with my retro setup. Plus, I want to get some Super Nintendo controllers, and 8BitDo just released a 4-button Neo Geo style controller, and I want to pick that up. But I know that and this and the Super Nintendo style controllers, like, they're all going to have their own configurations, and I just got to figure out how to make it so that it's streamlined, so that my system knows, oh, he's holding this controller, let's load that thing and be done with it. And Russ, I might pick your brain about that later. All right, well, those are the games that we've been playing. You guys ready to move on to the news?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right. I want to start us off with one that I'm kind of excited about this, but Final Fantasy 14 is coming to Xbox. Like, we have seen a lot of people positing that Square Enix and Microsoft were button heads. They weren't happy with each other. That's why we were seeing Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Remake be PlayStation exclusives, not coming to the Xbox. Clearly, the relationship between Microsoft and Square Enix is strained, so that's why we're not getting those games on that system. But then at Final Fantasy Fan Fest, which is I think every couple of years they have like this big thing where they unveil the next Final Fantasy 14 expansion, and that was in Las Vegas. And Yoshi P, is standing up on stage talking about, you know, what they're going to bring to the next thing. And then he says, and by the way, I want to bring out a friend of mine, Phil Spencer. And people went bananas because people have been asking to get this game on Xbox for 10 years. I know that I got my Xbox first before I got my PS5, and I wanted to play it on my Xbox, but I couldn't because I didn't have that at the time. Like, it wasn't an option. Well, next year you're going to be able to play it. It's going to get a graphical upgrade. It's going to get new classes and stuff. And the new CEO of Square Enix came out and he said, yeah, we're also going to be bringing other Final Fantasy games to Xbox when, I can't remember the exact wording he said, but he said like when appropriate or when possible or something like that. So Kyle, what's your reaction to this? Do you think that this just goes to show that everybody who was, you know, predicting that there were relationship issues between Xbox and Square, that they were wrong? Or maybe did the new CEO just come in and change things?
I don't think either necessarily. I think that Square is very conscious about putting out buggy or unmaintainable products. And I think that all of their dev teams have a very limited bandwidth. Now that they're deprecating the PS4 version of Final Fantasy XIV, they can finally have another console to put it on with the same amount of devs. I think that that's really what changed. The legacy support has been killing the team for a long time, especially with graphical updates. So I would put my money on the fact that they just didn't want to release something they couldn't maintain.
Yeah. So do you play Final Fantasy 14, or have you played Final Fantasy 14?
Yeah, I'm in Stormblood right now.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So that game is fantastic. It's really, really good. And if you get it, I don't know if you have to buy it or not, but I believe it's completely free to play from level 1 until level 70. And that is literally like hundreds upon hundreds of hours, right? So
yeah, it's up through Heavensward. Yeah.
So you didn't have to buy it until you got to Stormblood stuff, right?
I bought it before that, but new players don't have to.
There you go. There you go. Russ, what's your reaction to the Final Fantasy 14 news? Is it something that you care about at all?
So I never played it, but it is one that I've always been curious about. I just don't have the time for anything like that. But it does make me optimistic about Final Fantasy 16 maybe potentially coming to the Xbox. And so that is kind of exciting for me as well. I still haven't bought it on the PS5. It's a game I do want to play, but just haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah, I own it. I played it, and then I decided I'm going to go back and finish Zelda first, right? So then I went back and finished Zelda, and then I after finishing Zelda, I was like, I can't play any games right now. My brain just couldn't handle it after the amazing ending of Zelda. So I didn't play anything for like a week, and then I played retro stuff, and then yesterday I loaded up Final Fantasy 16. I couldn't remember how to play, and I was like, oh my god. So I got to go back to the hideout, and like there's like a stone thing that you can interact with and like do some combat practice, but I almost feel like I need to start over so that I can relearn how combat works, or maybe I got to watch some videos or something. I just wish that there was maybe there is, I haven't found it yet because I didn't look too hard, but I wish that there was a setting that said, let me redo the tutorials so that I can relearn the combat so that I wouldn't have to start over, because that's the kind of thing that happens to me, is because I stop playing a game and then I get back to it later. So Final Fantasy 16, Russ, you think a year before it comes or longer? Because they didn't do any Xbox development yet on it.
Yeah, I would say it's going to be a while, but that's okay. I never even finished 15, so it's like, yeah, take your time. I'll be here.
That's fair. Kyle, how long do you think before we see Final Fantasy 7 remake?
That one's going to be a little while too, but I think it would be a good deal shorter because it's already on PC, so the infrastructure already exists. Mm-hmm. So I would say that we could see an announcement as early as Gamescom, but I wouldn't expect it before probably Q2 of next year.
And do you guys think that we would see what's the next one called? Rebirth?
Which oh yeah,
Final
the
Fantasy
next,
VII, the next,
Yeah.
the sequel. Okay, so Rebirth. Do we think that Rebirth comes out day and date on both platforms, or does it have a year exclusivity on PlayStation first, and then it comes to Xbox a year later? What do you think, Russ?
But that would be interesting. It reminds me of like the whole what game was that? Was it Mass Effect, where there was like an issue where the first game hadn't come out on the PS3, and so they had to, when Mass Effect 2 came out, there was like a whole "we'll catch you up" kind of thing to it. I might be thinking of, yeah, I think it was that. And then there was another issue with like Metal Gear Solid, where it like had like, you know, one of the games had come out on only PlayStation 2, but then Xbox 360 got like a remake, and it was like a weird catch up thing. And so it would be interesting to see something like that, where Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out, but then what are they going to do about the others? Like, they have them all available beforehand? You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those where if you're in the Xbox ecosystem, how are you going to be able to catch up and jump into that game without having the past? And so, yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited for this for no other reason. Well, number one, Final Fantasy 14 is an MMO. The bigger the community is, the better that game is going to be. That's hands down. That's the full stop, an easy answer to say. Also, I really like that people who decided that they wanted to have an Xbox instead of a PlayStation are going to be able to play Square Enix games, because there was a lot of people who were thinking that that wasn't going to be the case. So this is good news for everybody except for fanboys who like to simp for a plastic box. All right, let's move on. Kyle, why don't you pick something from the show notes and we can move on to that story?
Oh, geez, put me on the spot.
I did.
Let's see. Let's go with Ubisoft. How about that?
All right. So Ubisoft, boy, this one I made a video about a little bit, where this is a really weird thing. So essentially, this person who's at PC Enjoyer on Twitter, or whatever you want to call it these days, they said, Ubisoft closes your account if you haven't logged in for some time. You will lose all your games purchased forever. All right. And then they showed an email that they had received where it says, basically, we noticed that you have not been using your Ubisoft account associated with this email address. We've temporarily suspended your inactive account and will be closing it permanently in 30 days. Now, Ubisoft support, to their credit, replied to this person, and they said, hey there, we just wanted to chime in and say you can avoid the account closure by logging into your account within 30 days since receiving this email pictured and selecting the cancel account closure link contained in the email. We certainly do not want you to lose access to your games or account, so if you have any difficulties logging in, then please create a support case with us. And my reaction to this is, number one, what if you don't have that email address anymore? Right? You're not going to get this notification, and if you don't log in, then your account's gone. Number two, clicking on things in email is almost always a terrible idea, so that's also bad. Kyle, what do you think about this?
I mean, I hate it in all senses of it, but I think it's a testament to the fact that we have to start taking video game preservation more seriously, because if they can do this for individual users, there's no doubt that they will just do it for all users if they go bankrupt or something. And then I also don't like I saw it somewhere, I don't know if it's in that article, but they had a technical reason for it, for database maintenance was what they were saying. That's nonsense from a technical perspective. So, I mean, like, it stinks. Like, they just want to clear people out and then not reimburse them with no valid reasons from either camp, either game preservation or technical standpoint. And I can't agree with them in any way.
Yeah, I heard that it had something to do with like data protection laws, that they had to do this in order to be compliant with that. I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand that stuff. I think that if I bought something, I should have access to it, whether like that doesn't make any, that as a data protection thing doesn't make any sense to me. How do you feel about this, Russ? What's your reaction?
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit of a cop out. Like whatever reason they give, they're a company who's providing a service to their customer base where they should think of innovative ways to help out their customers, right? To be the good guy in that situation. If there is some sort of law where they have to do whatever, privacy thing, there's got to be a way to get around it. Every other company is figuring that out. And so it's just a very anti-consumer kind of move, like the Steam, like the whole Valve thing is like a great example. I bought like Steam games, I don't know, back in like 2007, 2008 for the first time. And I got to be honest, and probably the 5 years following that, I didn't even log in once. There was a point where I think I put in two-factor authentication and I couldn't figure out how that worked. It was like, early days of that stuff. And so I just didn't log in for the longest time. I had to end up like calling somebody in order to get my password back or whatever. And so I never lost all my stuff. Those games are still there from back in like 2007, 2008 in that 5-year period. And so yeah, there's got to be a way around that, and there's got to be a way to be the good guy in that situation, and they're not doing it.
Right, and they could blow a whistle and say, "Hey, if it is a law thing that they're just trying to be compliant with, they should point at that and say, this is a problem, and you guys, our customers, are going to get screwed, and it's not our fault. Please help us do something about this." But they're like, nobody knew about this, and then suddenly, PC Enjoyer gets an email and everybody's like, "Hey, wait a second, that's not cool." Now they did say, "Hey, we don't want you to lose your games. We're not going to delete your stuff," but they can, and that doesn't sound cool to me. And like Kyle, you brought up game preservation. Did you see that story about Hasbro doesn't have the files anymore for the Transformers games?
I did not see that.
Yeah,
it doesn't surprise me.
I'm going to bring it up on my phone real quick just because I don't have it on my computer and my computer's busy doing stuff. But over at PCGamer.com, here's an article that says, so there's a licensing agreement with Activision that expired in 2018. There were a bunch of Transformers games which were removed. And then during San Diego Comic-Con, a Hasbro spokesperson was talking to people at a Q&A, and they asked about these old titles. And they said, sadly, apparently Activision's not sure which hard drives they're on in their building. When a company eats a company that eats a company, things get lost, and that's very frustrating. Hope is, now that the deal is moving forward with Microsoft and Xbox, they'll go through all of the archives and every hard drive to find it all, because it's an easy Game Pass game. It's an easy Game Pass ad. We want those games back up for people who have a chance to play. So, like you bring up game preservation. These companies, they are not doing anything for game preservation. I think we even talked about that on the last episode. What do you think about that, Kyle?
I mean, it's sad, but it doesn't surprise me. Like the spokesperson said, companies eating companies, like stuff gets lost that way all the time. But I mean, if you look at it from the other way, it wouldn't have been that much of a problem if it was primarily physical, right? If it was primarily physical, then somebody could just hand them a copy and they could dump it using their encryption keys or whatever. And they might not have the source files, but they could definitely redistribute it on Game Pass that way. So like they don't need to recompile or anything. So yeah, that's just it doesn't surprise me, but it's very sad that I assume we're going to be hearing a lot of these.
Right, games are just going to vanish. Russ, can you pick one game that you're afraid is going to vanish someday?
Oh my gosh. It's a hard one, and it's funny because I was thinking to myself as you guys were talking, I'm like, I could give them a few websites to get the game back. But anyway, like I think that that's a really hard one to say, because there's so many that are nice and archived, but something like. No, I don't want to say because it's on my Desert Island disc. So we'll talk about that later on. But yeah, there are certain games that I just cherish their existence, and so yeah, I don't want those to go away at all.
Fair. We will talk. We will revisit this at the end of the show. All right, Russ, why don't you pick a topic for us to talk about from the show notes?
So I want to talk about the Project Q leak because I didn't get a chance to read all of it. I was, obviously on vacation. I did see a little bit about it. So I did see that it is potentially Android based and it's going to have a touch screen. But do you guys have other information?
So go ahead, Kyle.
I was just gonna say the internals, yeah, they look like a generic Android tablet, basically. Nothing crazy, just DualSense strapped onto that.
Yeah, and so like in the video, like you get to see like it's a touch screen, and they're going through and showing off a couple of things, and you can see like they took the screen off. You can see the internals a little bit. I'm not a hardware guy, so that stuff does not jump out at me as oh, look at this, look at that. You know, that's the kind of thing that I don't notice. But you know, one thing that I didn't see is an SD card slot. And if this is if it's a device that's designed for streaming, then I'm pretty sure it's going to have really, really low storage. And so anybody's hopes of doing any kind of emulating on this thing, and I assume that that's one of the reasons that you're very interested in it, Russ, aka Retro Game Core. I don't think it's going to be good for that. I'm still interested in the device though, because I'm, being able to play my PlayStation when I'm not sitting over there at that couch on a device that it's meant for and not using my phone for it. I think that sounds cool, especially because it's an 8-inch tablet. What do you think about that, Russ?
So yeah, I agree. Like the thing that really interested me about it is that Sony handhelds are like the largest like hack community out there, right? People are still working on the PSP. I just saw there's a new like custom firmware that they released last week for the PSP, and then also obviously a PS Vita. And so I was hoping that this would be like the third in a trilogy where they, a whole community would get behind it and do all sorts of cool hacky things with it. But you bring up a great point with the storage thing. If there's no storage available, then what are they going to do? And so, yeah, that kind of sucks. I thought I saw, was there a potential price leak too? Was that part of it? I saw something like $150 floating around somewhere.
So I saw $200. I saw $199. But I don't know if that was just leak but I definitely, like, everybody, myself included, assumed that they're going to be shipping this thing at $300. And at $300, it's a stupid purchase. It's just a stupid purchase at $300. But at $199 or $150, holy cow, that to me, that's compelling. Now, Kerry, who's currently on his way back from LTX, probably jet lagged, much like our friend Russ here. He has very strong feelings about this thing. He thinks it's stupid, and I'm sure that for his use case, it makes perfect sense. But for me, I think for $150, this thing seemed like a really cool device where I could play my PlayStation games anywhere in my house. Kyle, did you see anything about $150?
I've seen, like you, I've seen both floating around. I think 150 makes it more compelling, but I don't know if it makes it more compelling than one of the other retro handhelds or even like the AYN products, because they start at 150, I think, or somewhere around there.
199, yeah.
Yeah, so like, and those are much more capable with SD card slots and everything like that. So yeah, I would assume that the hacking community would at least tear into it and probably replace the storage. You can solder on new storage if you want, but yeah, I would guess that they're aiming for 150, but I don't know if it's feasible if the backbone already is $99.
Right.
I feel like the backbone being $99, like, it's not $99 because they have to make it that price in order for it to be profitable. Like, they are making so much money on that thing. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason that thing has to be $99. They could easily make that thing way, way cheaper and still make a profit on it. And that makes me say, well, okay, well, then this thing could be 150. And Sony might not make money on it at 150, but it would further invest people into their ecosystem, and it would make people much more likely to stick with PlayStation. I mean, I just bought this PlayStation, then I bought the Project Q or whatever that is that they're going to call it. So I'm going to keep buying my games on PlayStation. That's just good business sense, even if they don't make a profit on that display. I don't see Sony doing it right. Not hardware wise, but just price wise, because their stuff is always so expensive, and they like to lock people in. But I do agree with you, Kyle, that people can just solder on new stuff. But that's a very small number of people that are going to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was thinking if they're going to hack anything about it, they should be able to hack so that you could play Xbox Game Pass on it. That would be amazing.
That'll be in like the first day because of streaming. Like somebody will get into that operating system on day one, and they'll be like, "Wow, we just downloaded Xbox Game Pass from the Google Play Store or whatever," and they're off to the races. But as far as installing things locally, I don't think that's going to happen, just because of storage, which sucks. What do you guys think the storage would be on something like that? Like 32 gigs?
I was thinking 64. Yeah,
I was going to say 32.
Yeah, 32 or 64, and that's like you just got to have enough room for an operating system, and maybe to do like updates for bugs or something like that.
Right.
All right, let's move on to our next topic, and that would be Oblivion getting a remake. I'm excited for this because my first Elder Scrolls game that I remember playing was Oblivion. I got it on my Xbox 360. And I played that. I never beat it because, attention span of a gnat. But I loved that game, and I thought it was so cool. In fact, when I got my Steam Deck, it was one of the very first games that I installed on my Steam Deck. And I went through and did like Steam input controls and stuff. I had so much fun playing that game, but it's not as good as Skyrim. There's a lot of things about it that don't quite hold up as well. But it's possibly getting a remake. This comes to us from Video Games Chronicles. Here's what they have to say. New graphics are rendered in Unreal Engine 5. Most of the gameplay physics are still done in the Oblivion engine. They also say that this is going to be released at the end of 2024 or early 2025, depending mostly on if it's a remake or a remaster. Kyle, how do you feel about this? Are you an Elder Scrolls junkie?
Yeah, I am. I've spent more time modding than I have breathing, probably. My first game was Morrowind, but Oblivion is my favorite of the series by far, so I would love to see this. I think that Skyrim is a little too dumbed down, but Oblivion has a little more depth, so I really hope this is a true rumor.
So real quick, I just want to say that it's being remade by Virtuos, which is the same company that is remaking Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. Russ, are you hyped for this, or are you like, well, I'll just play the old one?
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed about it. So I mentioned before, but I played a lot of Fallout 3 on the Xbox 360. I played through all of it and all the DLC, which is a lot for me. And I remember before Skyrim came out, I was like, oh crap, I better learn what Oblivion is. And so I remember renting it from Gamefly. You guys know what that is, where it's like Netflix for games. Yeah, so I rented that. I also wanted to get some achievements, and so that was part of it. But anyway, so I ended up playing probably 20-40 hours of it altogether, so I probably didn't finish everything, but I got pretty far in it, and it took me a long time to warm up to it, just because it was just so different than Fallout initially, at least in terms of cosmetically. But once I started playing it, I realized it was very similar. There's just the whole Bethesda premise where you just walk into a situation and you don't know what's going to happen. It could be something where you just kind of walk in the park, you're just killing some rats and you're done, or it could just be that you're going to be in there for 3 hours, like you don't know, and so I really like that aspect of Oblivion, but I'm not sure I would be ready to go back to that. Like, this was, it was a different time in my life. I just had a lot more time and more boredom. And so, I don't know. I think nowadays my game choices are very deliberate, and something like that and we'll talk about this with Zelda too, is something like that where it just kind of opens up and just gives you more possibilities is a huge turnoff for me nowadays. I'm just like, no, give me a linear path that I can follow. I want to see what the developers made. I don't want to see what I can make. And so, yeah, I don't think I would play it even if they made a remake, maybe just to test out the graphics and stuff. But that's probably it.
You get analysis paralysis. Like, you just too many choices and you're like, well, I'll just play something else.
Yeah, I can see all those things and I want to do them, but I know that practically I can't actually do it. And so it just makes it like, I don't even want to start, and so.
Yeah, I went to my barber last week and we were talking about video games because he plays video games. And we were talking about Zelda, and he was like, because he's a huge Diablo fan, but right before Diablo came out, he ended up picking up Zelda. and we were talking about Zelda. I said, did you finish it? And he's like, no, because every time I go to play it, like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing. And I walk 5 feet and I see a shiny thing off to the side. So then I go do that. And then I'm like, okay, I was doing this other thing. Well, wait, what's that? And it's just a continual, there's breadcrumbs everywhere instead of having breadcrumbs in a line. And so you end up making your own line instead of following a line that's left by the devs. And sometimes for me, that works really well. And sometimes it doesn't. For me, for Zelda, that worked really well. For Skyrim, I couldn't tell you the story of Skyrim. And I have like hundreds of hours in that game because it was, oh, I'm going to go over here. And then I'm going to go into this house. And then I end up in a cave somehow. And then there's like some family is having some monsters attacking them in a book. It's like just one thing to the next, and I never figure out what the main story. Like I never go back to the main story because all the side quests are so compelling. Is that what you love about those games, Kyle? Is that you get to have your own story instead of one that's given to you?
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's probably the best manifestation of the old like Nintendo Power days where you just learn about this stuff through word of mouth, and it's a very unique experience to not have the same flow of a game as your best friend or something, and to just hear, oh, I did this crazy thing, and just go try to replicate it. I love that.
That's awesome. Kyle, go ahead and pick a story for us to hit.
Let's see. Let's get... let's do the 8BitDo keyboard because that thing looks amazing.
Oh my God, that looks so good. All right, so for those of you that don't know, the 8BitDo or 8BitDo, yell at me in the comments if I pronounced it wrong. They made a mechanical keyboard. I know that Russ bought one. Kyle, did you buy one?
I haven't yet, but I will as soon as I'm back in the U.S.
Okay. It is inspired by the Nintendo Entertainment System or the Famicom. There's 2 versions of it. It is gorgeous. It looks so freaking cool. Kyle, tell me why you're going to be buying this as soon as you get back to the States.
I mean, obviously the way it looks, and I love mechanical keyboards. I have a Keychron K8 Pro on my desk. But I think that it would be great, especially for Steam Deck. Just like to make a themed setup with the deck. It has Bluetooth and everything, so you don't need to plug in the dongle or anything. And having a full mechanical keyboard to use with those devices is second to none.
Yeah, the colors are fantastic. If you guys haven't seen, if you're listening to the show, there's a link in the show notes so you guys can see it. It has like old school switches on it that you can turn. It's got buttons up top. It's got a giant A and B button. Russ, you pre-ordered this. Is this because you're really hyped for it? Because you're going to use it, or because it looks cool?
Oh, it's probably like 90% because it looks cool. You know, like I'm just a huge, like NES is my favorite console of all time. And so I just love the look of it. And yeah, I agree. I love that, like, there's a volume knob, which is amazing. But yeah, I'm probably not going to play it there very much. Although I did see someone on Twitter mention that, you know, it comes with that separate controller. It's a big B and A, but you could set those to be like loading a save state and saving a save state. And so if you're like playing on your computer, you just like, boop, save the game or whatever, you keep going, oh, load it back up, you know. And so I like that idea. You know, there's certain games I'll play like that where I'll save a state right before a certain part, like, for example, Tecmo Super Bowl. I will often do this like save state thing where I will save the state right before the snap, and then I'll see what I can do. And if I don't like what happens, then I'll load it again and do it over so that I can win 99-0 against the computer, because that's as high as you can go. And so I'll do that sometimes. I'll be like, I'm going to spend half hour just doing that because it's fun, and it would be really fun to use that little keyboard attachment thing. So yeah, I am going to use it, but I don't think I'll actually be typing on it much. I think I'll probably just use it in the background of my videos and stuff. It seems a little bit too high for me. I use low profile keyboards just because it affects my thumb by hitting the space bar a lot with a higher keyboard, even with a wrist rest. It's really weird. Anyway, and so I probably won't type on it as my main keyboard, but I definitely bought one, and so I'll be using it in my videos and stuff.
I'm curious, when you do that Tecmo Super Bowl trick that you're talking about, does the AI, that's generous, does the computer controlled character, is it the same play every time, or do they pick the play in the moment after that?
So, there's this screen where you guys each pick the play. After that screen, they've already picked their play. And so you basically, I usually will save state actually in the picking your place thing, and they'll pick the same one every time. And so
that's what I was, okay.
Yeah. And so what I'll do is I'll pick like my defensive play and then see which offensive one they did. And if I don't like how it fell out, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to pick the exact defensive play that they did, because then the whole team just kind of scrambles on them, And so I'll sometimes do that. Or if I don't want to do that, like if I want to make a bunch of sacks, like, so for example, I try to get like so many quarterback sacks, that I'll get, what do they call that when you get the 2 points when you get them in their other ends? A safety, right?
Yeah.
So I'll get so many safeties in a season that guy will be my lead scorer for the whole team, like for the whole NFL, basically. So I will do that all the time. Or I will also do like my guy who's doing the 1 point like kickoff return or whatever, not kickoff return. What do they call that? I don't know football, obviously.
Return, yeah.
But yeah, your post point, like you get a touchdown and then you get field goal right afterwards, right? Your 1 point. I'll also do that where that guy becomes the leading scorer too, because he's scoring so many times from that 1 point after a touchdown that he gets up there as well. And so, yeah, I just cheat that game so much, but it's like one of the things I love doing. And so, yeah.
Russ is a dirty cheater, and we love him for it.
I love it.
It's great. This thing is like completely customizable. You can like add in macros and stuff. They have the 8BitDo Ultimate V2 software. I did not order one of these because it's $99, not because it's not worth that. I don't want to have another thing on my desk, and this, I would buy it in an instant if it had a numpad. It doesn't have a numpad, and a numpad is very important to me. I really did give it a shot, everybody. I tried using a keyboard without a numpad, and every time that I have to type a number, even if it's just like 87, I I use the numbers on the top row of my keyboard. I always use the numpad. It's probably from working retail when I was, in high school. I just can't use a keyboard without a numpad. So this one's out for me, but I'm jealous because it looks so damn cool. Which one did you order, Russ? The NES or the Famicom one? Both.
So I was very torn. I got the NES one, but the Famicom is awesome. It's got like the Japanese characters on it as well, but it just doesn't have the same nostalgia. I think the colors are better on the Famicom one. I think that maroon color looks really great, but I just, it just didn't make a lot of sense for me just from a practical standpoint. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go with the NES one. So.
Awesome. Kyle, if you get one when you get back to the States, which one you getting?
NES, for sure.
NES.
For the same reason, yeah.
Let us know in the comments on the YouTube channel down below if you're getting this. Are you going with the Famicom version, or are you going to go with the NES version? Let us know, because I also am torn. I agree with you, Russ. The colors of the Famicom are 1,000 times better, but I don't have nostalgia for Famicom, so it makes it hard for me to make that pick up. Russ, pick a final topic for us before we get to the topics that were submitted.
So let's talk about the Switch follow-up next year, because that is one I read about just because I was kind of interested about it. So the article basically, I didn't read this article, but I read a different one, and it basically said that the current idea is that it's going to come out for Christmas time next year. And so that'll be really interesting. It makes sense, the gap between like the Wii and the Wii U was about 6 years, and I think the Wii U to Switch was about 5 years, and so it's overdue at this point because we're at 7 years now, and so it's got to be coming. And I've heard that people have dev kits and stuff like that already, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it was leaked that the devs from not Metroid Prime, what's the Metroid Dread? The devs from Metroid Dread, Mercury something. Apparently, they have a dev kit. That was a leak. We don't know if that's confirmed or not. But then we had this information from Video Games Chronicle, where basically they're saying next year. What do you think about that as a release time? Usually consoles launch around Christmas time. The Switch launched in March with this almost like a soft launch, because they had like no games at launch, but they had Zelda. And that kind of propelled the Switch forward. And then all of the devs were like, or publishers were like, oh, okay, this is not a Wii U situation. This is an all hands on deck. We got to start making games for Switch. What do you think about that as a launch time, Kyle?
I think it makes a lot of sense, especially considering the timings for the other console makers. Usually the Nintendo Variety comes out around the same time as a like a Pro edition of the other consoles, which are also sort of rumored to be late next year. So I think that would be the only way that Nintendo could remain competitive during holiday season next year. And if all games come out, or a lot of major games come out during the holiday season, so that would be a gimme for like a boost to the Switch 2 sales, especially if it doesn't have backwards compatibility.
If it doesn't
If
have
it
backward,
doesn't, yes.
so can you
I don't know if it
explain
will
that?
or not.
Right.
I
Yeah,
don't
we
know
know
if it
you
will
don't
or
know.
not, but I mean, I mentioned it the other on another podcast, but I think that it could be difficult for them because there's no clear upgrade path to a much newer ARM processor that could also run Switch games at full speed. So the only way I could see them doing backward compatibility is a PS2, PS1 situation with an additional chip on board. And I think that if it's a portable console like the Switch, that could kill power consumption. So I don't know if they'll be able to make it backwards compatible like to the same degree that previous consoles have been.
Also, the media, like the Switch has these weird carts,
Yeah.
right? So does that mean that if it is backwards compatible, then the next system has to support those weird carts? Kind of like when the Game Boy Advanced came out, it had the Game Boy slot in the bottom of it and the Game Boy Advance slot on the top of it. If I'm remembering correctly, might have been that might have been like the DS or something.
That was the DS, yeah.
It was the DS. Thank you. So, Russ, do you think that this thing's going to be backwards compatible with the old media?
Yeah, I'm really hoping so. You know, in the article I also read, I saw that it was going to be a cartridge-based system. They didn't specifically say it was going to also use the same Switch cartridge, you know, but yeah, I'm really interested in seeing that. I think that backwards compatibility is going to be a must. You know, it's going to just be one of those things that from a consumer standpoint, I don't think that a lot of households are going to want to have the Switch and then the Switch 2 also, you know, hooked up to their TV. And so it would be really great if they could replace it, maybe pass on the old Switch to somebody else or put it in another room or something like that. And so, yeah, I really do hope that they do the backwards compatibility. How they figure that out will be crazy. You know, I had a thought while Kyle was talking, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if they're just going to use, like, they're going to hire the Yuzu team to just, like, figure out emulation. You know, go x86, and they'll just put Yuzu on there, and then they'll just, like, emulate the game. And if they can do that by putting in the cartridge and then running it off that, I'm not really sure if that's possible. But, yeah, who knows? I mean, they've obviously probably thought through a lot of these things, and they're always innovative. And so who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us in a good way.
If it's a cartridge-based system, then I think that it has to be it's also going to be a portable system. There's no good reason to do a cartridge-based system unless it's for portability, because you know you bring Blu-ray or whatever, or even you know they skip. You know, you move them around too much, they skip. Something's going to screw up. Optical media doesn't work very well in that regard, so that's why they went with the cartridges. So if it's true that it's cartridge based, I don't see any good reason. First off, then we know it's portable, but secondly, I don't see any good reason for them to switch formats unless there's a limitation to the current format that we're not aware of. The like size, but Nintendo's really good at optimizing for size.
I can
Go
speak
ahead,
to that
Kyle.
a little bit.
Do so.
The current Switch cartridges, like Luigi's Mansion and a lot of the bigger ones, those are only half the cartridge internally. If you open it up, the actual chip only consumes half the cartridge. So you could easily double down on storage density just by expanding that to the full footprint of the actual cartridge itself. And also, I mean, a next gen hardware could have a hardware decryption layer, kind of like the PS5 or Xbox Series. So they could compress the assets down further without any lossiness.
Okay. Well, would that make them way more expensive though, if they doubled the storage on them?
I mean, flash memory is dirt cheap. I mean, look how much you can pick up a 16 gig micro SD for. So like it should be fine. Like it would be comparable.
Well, I mean, but at the same time, think about it. When the Switch came out, we had the Switch tax because companies were like, they didn't want to spring for the more expensive cartridges, so they were charging people more money. So I think that we would probably, like, Nintendo's already selling games at $70. Do we think they get more expensive? Russ, what do you think?
I hope that if anything, that that a standard norm becomes $70. You know what I mean? Like that probably is a likely scenario. Companies are going to figure out a way. Okay, how can we charge more without looking like the bad guy? And so, yeah, I can see that coming in the future. I hope they don't go over 70. You know, do the limited edition $100 versions. You know what I mean? Like get their money back that way with those extra big fans. But yeah, I'm hoping that the base price will still remain $60, $70.
Kyle, do you think there's any? Let's pretend that this thing is not backwards compatible. Do you think there's any chance that they just say, you know what? No cartridges, no discs, digital only. Screw you, GameStop. Do you think they do that?
I was actually about to mention that. Yes, I think that's like if it's not backwards compatible, that's their most likely path. I mean, just. I would be hesitant to like it, considering they just shut down the eShops last year. But I would say that that's probably what they would do, especially because the eShop, as it is raking them in so much money already. I mean, there's basically no overhead to that, and every game in the eShop, if it's $60, is raking in more money than a physical copy. So I don't see why they would continue charging for the overhead of that.
Yeah. All right, let's move into the topics that were submitted for from last episode. We had this one come in from Rue 3005. They said combining desert island discs and the best year selection from a previous show. If stuck on a desert island, what 5 games would you want with you? But each game needs to be from a different decade. So we had to decide ahead of time if 2020s would count as a decade because we are in this. And because some of us are too young to remember the 70s, we decided we'll skip the 70s and we'll go with 2020s. But let's work forward from the 80s. Let's start in the 80s. Kyle, what is your pick from the 80s? What's your desert island game from the 80s?
This might surprise you guys, but Tetris.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's a smart choice.
So, for which system? Game Boy?
Probably the NES, I would say.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. Russ, what about you?
So I picked Dragon Warrior. This is an interesting one. So I've talked about this on the podcast because I talk about this game all the time. But I recently made a video where I was talking about playing Pokemon on the RG Nano, like a little handheld device. And I mentioned that I feel like I'm too old for Pokemon. And people got upset about that. They're like, I played Pokemon as a kid. I'm not too old. And I'm like, okay. That's the thing, is I did not play Pokemon as a kid. I played my first Pokemon game when I was 20 years old, and I just felt too old for it even back then. And so I don't have that nostalgic like resonance, but I do have the same with Dragon Warrior. That's a game I can play over and over again, and I have. And so if I was to play a game, from the 1980s, and I thought about this a lot with the Desert Island part, where I was like, okay, I need a game that has a lot of depth or replayability. And so for me, I picked Dragon Warrior, even though like this is my era, like the NES era. This is the one that I would pick, even though it's not my favorite NES game of all time.
Yeah, so for me, I think those are both awesome picks, by the way. But for me, for the 80s, I went with replayability. And I decided that I wanted to have the Sega Genesis version of Ms. Pac-Man. I played that so much growing up, and it's the thing that I love most about it is it has like a fast mode. So like right at the very beginning, you can be like in fast mode in Ms. Pac-Man on the Genesis, and it is such a fun game. And I just had to go with a Pac-Man game for nostalgia because Pac-Man is like one of my favorite things ever. So Ms. Pac-Man for the Sega Genesis, that's my 80s pick. That came out in 1984. Let's move forward to 1990s. Kyle, what'd you pick and why?
I picked the original Baldur's Gate on PC because it's one of my favorite games of all time. So I mean, I've already put well over 2,000 hours in it throughout my life, so I might as well just keep riding that coaster to the end.
And what class are you going to roll at the beginning?
I would probably go, if we're talking the original one, you don't have any of the expanded edition classes.
Yeah.
So I would say probably mage and then dual class to thief later on, or dual class to fighter, one of the two.
Awesome. Russ, what's your 90s pick and why?
So Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo, because I kind of went with both replayability and depth in that one, because I've never 100% of that game. I've actually never beat the game. This is one of those poor confessions, but yeah, I've never beat that game. And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to be on Desert Island, I'm going to pick a game that I've always wanted to play. Initially, I thought, maybe Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VI, but I was like, no. I gotta go Super Mario World. That's a game that I will enjoy from level 1 all the way through it. And so, those, as you go through the world map, you see the little red dot, and the red dot means that you haven't beat everything yet. And so, I have a lot of red dots on my map when I go through that world. So there's a lot of that game I still haven't figured out.
I don't 100% games. That is one game that I have 100%ed, and I went through. I played it on, I obviously played it on the Super Nintendo. I have a whole story about me and the Super Nintendo in that game, but I'm not going to get into it here because it's too long of a story. But I also ended up picking it up on the Game Boy Advance. And if you went through and got all of the big coins and finished the game, then the game started over again. And the big coins, which were dragon coins, were replaced with princess coins. And so then you could go through and get them all again. And I did both of those things because I love that game so much. And that's why I almost picked it for mine. But I went with one that had more depth. And it fast forward from 1984 Ms. Pac-Man all the way to 1999. I was right at the end of the 90s. EverQuest. Russ asked at the beginning, do we have internet for this? Yes, we have internet, because I'm not playing. I want EverQuest. EverQuest, which came out in 99. I adore that game. It is this massive world, and there's so much to experience in that game. And I have so much nostalgia for that, because it was funny. I used to have a podcast called 143 Pixels, and I was interviewing David Brevik about it. And he's the creator of Diablo. And we were talking about EverQuest because he picked that game to talk about. And he and I were wistfully remembering corpse runs where you got killed, and if you don't get back to your corpse and get your stuff, you level down, and you have to run naked through all these monsters to get to your corpse to get your gear back. And we were remembering that and smiling about it, and I can imagine people being like, that sounds terrible, but it was awesome at the time. And if you're looking for a game to put lots of hours into on a desert island, EverQuest is it. That's why I went with that one. Kyle, what's your 2000s game?
I'm going to say Twilight Princess for this one, just because it was until very recently my favorite Zelda game. So I could play that one over and over again.
How many times have you played it? Oh, good question, Russ.
I can answer how many times I played it. I think I've put probably 15 or 20 playthroughs into it already. Russ, what did you say?
GameCube or Wii?
Oh, I played it on the Wii, so I'm the backwards guy. That's all I had it on, and it still messes with me on the HD version.
That's awesome. Russ, what about you?
So this is a great era too, because initially I thought, okay, maybe a GameCube or a PS2 game, but then also Xbox 360 was in the 2000s. And so I actually didn't pick either of those. I went with Wii Sports, because that is a game I can just never get tired of. And so both the bowling and the tennis, those are the two games that I can just play those forever. So
yeah, the bowling was when we got the Wii, people my mom would come over to our house and play the bowling game with us, my mom does not play video games, but she came over and was like, oh, let's play that bowling game. That's awesome. So yeah, that's a really good pick. So for me, I went with kind of inspired. I mean, not inspired by Kyle because we picked our stuff beforehand, but I ended up going with Tetris DS, the best Tetris game in my opinion.
I agree.
I adore that game. Tetris DS is so good. There's something about the size of the screen that makes me better at Tetris when I play on Tetris DS. And if you've never played it, there's this awesome head-to-head mode where you're on the top screen, the person you're playing against is on the bottom screen, and you're trying to shove the lines to the other screen, and everything is Nintendo related. So you've got like Nintendo or like Mario music in the game when you're playing, and Zelda stuff, like stuff walking across the screen while you're playing. It's so good. It is my favorite Tetris game ever, and I really, really wish that Nintendo would re-release that somehow, because it's I mean, well, I don't think it'll ever happen because it's a dual screen game, but Tetris DS is my pick. 2010s, Kyle, what'd you pick?
Skyrim, just for the incredible replayability and the ability to mod it, assuming that we do have internet, like Russ asked. Then I would basically never run out of content. So yeah.
What's the first mod you want to install when you install Skyrim?
It's a silly, stupid one, but it's one of the first mods that came out. It's called the Parthenox Dilemma. You get a friend dragon somewhere in the story. I'm sorry if there's any spoilers here, but eventually you have to kill him, and that's a stupid move, even lore-wise. So that makes it so you don't have to.
Oh, okay, all right, that's awesome. Russ, what about you for 2010s?
So I was thinking about something with a lot of depth in this one too, and that's just why I asked about the internet. And so initially I had picked Final Fantasy 14 because it's a game I haven't touched at all, but I was like, we even mentioned earlier in this podcast, it was like, I just don't have the time, but on Desert Island I would, and if I was going to play an MMO, I think that's probably the one I would probably choose. But then I thought, okay, well, hold on. If I'm going to play MMO, then I'm going to play Destiny. And so I ended up thinking that Destiny 2 is actually probably the one I would use in the 2010s. Even though I really love the first one, there's just so much content and depth in Destiny 2, and so that's probably what I would choose instead of Final Fantasy 14, even though that one was almost the choice that I made.
Nice. I ended up going with this is what I actually have written on there because I wasn't sure which way I wanted to go. I said Skyrim or Minecraft, and then in parentheses with mods. So like I'm not playing either of those games without the mods. I'd be more likely to play Skyrim without the mods, but Minecraft, I absolutely want to have the mods so you can do stuff like the Sky Factory, where you start out just like on a dirt block on a tree, and you have you end up building like nuclear reactors and stuff. There's so much depth to Minecraft, and so that's why I ended up going with that one. 2020s. I'm not going to say what I think everybody's going to pick, but everybody, before we say what these are, go ahead and type a comment down below. Tell us, what do you think we're about to say? Kyle, go ahead.
Nobody would guess this, but Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, it's basically like, I think it's probably the best game that's been ever made, objectively speaking. So like, I can't pick anything else.
Yeah. Russ?
I did not pick that. So
okay.
I even before we started, I said, there's no way you guys picked the ones that I picked. And then one of you guys was like, oh, well, we all picked the same 2020s one. And I'm thinking, oh, they probably mean Tears of the Kingdom. And I didn't even think of that game. As
wow. I can't wait to find out what you picked.
So I ended up thinking a lot about this too. The one I kind of came down to is actually God of War Ragnarok. Because when I finished that game, and I think earlier this year, right when it first came out, I took like 3 days off from working, and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do any YouTube stuff. I'm just going to play this game, and I just dove into it. And I remember when I finished, I thought to myself, I can't wait to forget everything that just happened so I can play it all over again. That's how much I just love that story. And then also, I didn't finish everything. I just finished the story. I didn't finish all the other side stuff. And so I'm looking forward to going back and doing that too. For me, that's the perfect game where I like a linear game. I like something where it's telling me the story, but then also there's enough choice where I can go off and do other things if I want to. It's not like Last of Us where it's like you're just playing the story. There's not much else to it. There's just enough there that is a little bit open world, and so that's probably what I would choose instead. And so, yeah, I went with Ragnarok.
And I ended up going with Tears of the Kingdom for all of the same reasons that Kyle went with it. It is, in my opinion, the greatest game ever made. And the only reason I'm not still playing it right now is because I want to experience these other games. So I had to force myself to stop playing because it's just so damn good. All right, we had one more topic that was sent in by Fender178. They said, here's another possible topic. With Activision Blizzard purchasing by Microsoft entering its final stretch, so to speak, what do you guys think of the possibility of World of Warcraft coming to consoles like the Xbox? Kyle, I posted this as a possible topic, and you had a very fast answer. Go ahead.
My answer was literally neat but unlikely, and I guess I'll elaborate on that. So first, I think that, first of all, it's a game that is built with a massive amount of buttons and screen real estate in mind that wouldn't play very well on controller without a complete revamp that would alienate their existing player base. And second of all, it would be that existing player base. The player base that would come from Xbox and the ones that exist, I don't think would mesh very well. If they do a Final Fantasy XIV thing where everybody's in the same worlds, then the people on console are probably going to be toxicked out of the room. And if they're in different worlds, then I don't know if subscriber count would stay high enough. What I do think might happen is a free WoW subscription with Game Pass Ultimate, though.
Oh, that's interesting. Russ, if World of Warcraft came to Xbox or consoles, would you play it on there?
This is one I've always been a little bit curious about over the years, but I've always been super intimidated because of the amount of inputs and the keyboards and macros and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's just, so overwhelming. And so I never, ever even tried that game once. If it was just something that was on Xbox and on Game Pass and I could just download it and try it and they maybe revamped it so I could use it with a controller, sure. I mean, I played Diablo 4 for the first time, my first Diablo game this year, because it's like very console friendly. And so I could see something like World of Warcraft, at least, dipping my toe in it for a little bit.
So I played World of Warcraft is one of my favorite games of all time. I haven't played since Cataclysm, since the end of Cataclysm. I mean, I dipped my toe in a couple times after Cataclysm, and people who'd never played it, you're like, what's that? That's one of the expansions. It's been a long time since I played that game. But one thing that I have noted is that Blizzard has been slowly adding in things that make it more console friendly. So one thing is they made the action camera. The action camera kind of takes the camera, the way the camera used to work in World of Warcraft, which was very, very much top down, looking down on your character, and put it behind the shoulder of your character. And when it's an optional thing that you can turn on, and oh man, it completely changes the way the game feels. It feels a lot more like an action game, and it absolutely feels more like a console game when you play the game that way, using the action cam. Secondly, when the game first came out, it was absolutely, you're absolutely right, Russ. It was a piano game where you have 100 different buttons that you have to press. It's not like that anymore. A lot of the abilities that you have been like removed, and they very much streamlined it so you can pretty much get away with like one row of keys. If you've played Final Fantasy XIV, then you know that like you have a mountain of abilities that you access through the controller, and it works just fine. Like I think you probably have like 30 different abilities on any character, and you can access all of that stuff with different trigger, bumper, and thumb like D-pad and face button inputs. So I do think it would work on controller, no problem. And in the last expansion, there was data mining that found hooks for traditional controllers built into World of Warcraft. They never actually put that stuff there, but there were hooks that were found by data miners. So I do think that it's possible that the game comes to console. The one reason that it might not is because of what Kyle said, the toxicity, where people would just be like, oh, stupid console player, get out of here. We don't want you. But I mean, I know it's an MMO. You don't really communicate with randoms very much. You just queue for a dungeon, show up, kill a monster, and leave. And so nobody's necessarily going to know if you're on a console or not. And Final Fantasy XIV mixes everything together where you could be a mouse and keyboard player, or you could be like a controller player, and it works just fine. And I think that WoW could come to Xbox. I really hope it does, because it's just really, really fantastic. So if it did come to console, would you play it on console, Kyle?
If I had an Xbox, I would at least try it. I've tried it a few times before. And I have also made like complex joy to key setups to do exactly what you were saying, like Final Fantasy 14 eyes it. It still never felt right, but if they did overhaul it, I would at least give it a try.
That's awesome. Let us know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And that pretty much does it for this episode of the NerdNest podcast. Kyle, tell everybody what videos you've been working on, man.
I'll say the one that I just released, which is a Steam Deck hardware modding for thermals video, where I test 6 different products to try to cool the Steam Deck down way below what stock is. And I came up with some really interesting results that I was not expecting.
Yeah, so make sure you guys check that out over at Cryobyte33 on YouTube. That's CRYBOTYTE 33 on YouTube. And Russ, what's your latest video or your next video?
So I did that travel one, but the next one I'm working on is going to be an impressions video of the 1X Fly. So this is the 1X Player's new like flagship handheld. It's smaller and has a 1080p 7-inch screen with 120 hertz refresh rate. And so I am interested in this one because it's the only other handheld we see besides the ROG Ally that has that refresh rate. And so I just kind of want to see how it's all going to play out. It also has like customized RGB lighting on the sides of it. And so they put my name on the device itself. And so it shows like RGC, like pulsing in RGB, which is kind of neat. So yeah, so I'm going to do a quick impressions of that one and see how that stacks up against competition. The Indiegogo is not live for it. I don't know what the prices are going to be. Maybe they've announced it, but I don't see it on their page. And so that's going to come down to, whether or not it's going to be worth buying. So what I'm going to do is an impressions video, at least of, hey, this is how it is. And then when the campaign goes live and they have the pricing and all that stuff, and I'll say, okay, now here's my review of like whether or not I think you should buy it.
So for that device, does it have FreeSync as well?
I don't know. Like I literally like I pulled it out of the box and I've done like a little bit of testing with it, but I haven't actually gotten to the weeds about it yet. So I'm not sure. I hope it does, but you never know.
Look for Russ's video over at Retro Game Core on YouTube so that you can find out whether or not this thing has FreeSync. And I'm really curious what the RGB looks like with your stuff on it. That's really awesome. If you are watching this on YouTube, make sure that you like the video and share it with somebody that you think is awesome. Or you know what, send it to, if you thought the video was terrible, send it to somebody you hate. If you're listening to this and your favorite podcast player, please do rate the podcast. If that is an option, it helps out a ton. And thank you guys for hanging out with us from the Nerd Nest. I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.